Hey all, Pi here, and we are back with more Our Life, Beginnings and Always. And last time we finished off the final step that I have unlocked currently, so we're just going to say, and then the summer ended. Yes, I am sure. There was no denying it. Today was the very last day of summer. Tomorrow you were headed to class. I go to school with Cove, right? My priorities are showing. I'm gonna say my feelings were muddled. There were aspects of going to school that you missed, and others you would happily live without. If only you could pick and mix between bits of the summer and school. Yes, that'd be amazing. You got dressed, not envisaging the day before you, but contemplating what lay ahead of you tomorrow. Life was going to be different. You had come to think of the summer vacation as the norm, but school sucked up the majority of the year, whereas summer vacation was just a respite in the middle. Yep. I miss summer vacation. So, rather than it being different, it was kind of a return to the normal. What did your normal life really mean? You considered how fondly your moms talked about their summer vacations as kids. You dimly recognized that one year the pattern of school and summer itself would be over for good. It was hard to imagine. It sucks ass being an adult all of a sudden. Though, I will say, if you go to college, you kind of get to hold on to that a little bit. It does definitely change, and there's a sort of a transitional period, but, like, college is sort of extended school, but, like, yeah. Once you get out of grade school, it's never the same again. You'd gotten distracted, one arm still out of a sleeve. You pulled it through and put your mind back to the present. This season had brought about plenty of changes of its own, like Kyra's visit, though that too was coming to an end today. You were happy you'd finally gotten the chance to know her. She was interesting to be around. You liked how easy it was to talk to her. You finished dressing, which was good. Cove would be there any moment. You'd agreed to see his mom off together. Officially, the plan was that he would come over to bring you around to his house when she was ready to set off, but you both knew that you'd be hanging out for at least a little while beforehand. Kyra's visit had troubled Cove when it first happened. It had been a sudden change, thanks to Mr. Holden's infamous tendency to surprise people, but once he was able to adjust, he'd been in pretty good spirits with her around. It was a relief for everyone. You turned to your desk, where the box containing your accessories resided. A thought struck you like a bolt, and your eyes bored into the box. Should you wear an anklet for Cove's visit today? Yes! Yes! I'm sorry, I'm still not over the last one. You had some nice ones that you hadn't used in a while. Go big or go home? Yes. You decided to wear several anklets. Your heart pounded as you adorned anklet after anklet. You had to make sure he noticed, and now there was no way that Cove would miss it. People from the East Coast would be able to hear you jangling. God. When you like somebody, the best way to make sure they notice is to remember literally everything they say and then go to the absolute 12th degree with it. Don't take dating advice from me, kids. The next thought that crossed your mind was, you couldn't wait to see Cove, so you went downstairs to meet him when he arrived. You bounced down the stairs, your hand gliding over the rail. You wanted to make sure you got there first. If you didn't hurry, your moms might answer it. It was only a few minutes later when the doorbell rang. As you'd chosen to stand beside it to wait for Cove, there was no delay in pulling it open. God. Cove was there, just as you'd expected. Seeing you, he flashed you a bright grin. Hey. Hi, Joey. It took you long enough. You only live across the street. You stuck your tongue out at him as you ushered him inside, and then bustled him up the stairs. Back up in your room, you sat down on your bed and waited for Cove to settle in as you knew he would. With other guests, you might have offered them a seat, but you and Cove were long past those tentative stages of friendship. Your room was as familiar to him as his own. You watched as Cove sat down in your desk chair at his preferred spot. He rolled it closer to the bed to make it easier to chat, tweaking the angle so that he was facing you fully. Once happy with the position, he leaned in towards you, hands held in his lap. His actions weren't the ones of someone who planned on moving from his spot anytime soon, even though you had an appointment to keep together that day. When is your mom leaving?
Don't worry about it.
We've got some time. She's still got a shower and stuff before she goes. She didn't want me to just keep hanging around while she was doing that. Fair enough. He lifted his head, his gaze drifting out through the window and chuckled. I can't believe she's already leaving. Just when I'm getting used to her being there every day. He leaned back in the chair, a wry smile tickling his cheeks. Honestly, as an older person, I don't want to make it sound like I'm ancient, but like, I am an adult. I've been an adult for a good while. And like, the longer you're an adult, the more you realize that time just flies, man. 1 second you're young and free and living the good life, and the next second you have a job and you gotta pay bills and you haven't seen your extended family in 2 or 3 years. All that to say, the march of time slows for no one. Time's going by so fast. He cocked his head thoughtfully before shrugging. He ran a hand through his hair before shaking his head, as if shaking off the topic like a dog whipping off water following a dip in the sea. Cove looked back to you, lips parted as if he was about to speak, but instead his eyes widened and his mouth closed into a tiny frown. Something had caught his attention. Several somethings, to be accurate. Fuck. It was a wonder he hadn't heard or spotted them sooner. Yes. He cast his eyes back up to your face, then down to your ankle, and back to your face. He repeated the process once, twice more, as if struggling to hold the two items in tandem. Maybe he was weighing up whether this could be a coincidence or not. If so, you weren't sure how much clearer you could be while still being able to lift your feet. Or maybe he was just too shy to verbalize his thoughts, or was still trying to find the words, and this was the most he could manage. The attention made you feel... I mean, I'm over here dying. Because this is some shit I would pull. I'm gonna say thrilled. Yeah, I'm gonna go with thrilled. You felt energized by how impactful it had been, wanting to leap up, but not wanting to break the spell the jewelry had placed on Cove. On his next glance back to your face, Cove saw your expression had shifted. You watched as his bewilderment eroded into mortification as he realized he had been caught staring. He quickly spun in the chair to face the wall instead, allowing you to glimpse the flush that had spread all the way to his ears. Yes! He twisted in his seat, wringing his hands, determinedly avoiding looking in your direction again. It seemed that he had decided against saying anything at all. I mean, does it look good? Cove mumbled something unintelligible as he slumped lower, with how he was hunched over. The quiet words had no chance of reaching you. You weren't going to get anything out of him in this state. You waited for him to come around before speaking again. Finally, he piped up very softly.
That's,
Did you do it because of what I said before? I mean, you know... What do you think? The last few words were whispered as though they were a precious secret. The ankle bracelet. Bracelets! There are multiple. I'm gonna be a little bit coy. Maybe. His eyes squeezed shut. You had no idea if the answer made him feel better or more nervous. He eventually looked down at his lap, where his fingers were flexing and curling in an awkward dance of nerves. His chest rose as he breathed deep. Well, it looks good on you. Your heart skittered in your chest like a stone skipping across water. One big leap from the unexpected compliment, followed by a series of shorter ones as you absorbed the words. You beamed at him. I love this. You beamed at him. He looked at you again at last and returned the smile shyly. This really couldn't have worked out better, you thought. And there was nothing else he could add after that. The conversation lapsed into another comfortable lull. Cove swung his feet underneath the seat of the chair, eyes resting on you. Having him over here was so nice. No matter how you spent the time, you always felt better for being in his company. You couldn't help but adore him, both as a friend and in a way that plucked at your heart, a vague yearning for more. Maybe it was because summer was almost over that your feelings were rushing in on you now, like a high tide at the end of a long day. Summer was such a meaningful time for the two of you. Not only because it was when you first met, but because it was a season that you could spend almost entirely as you pleased, and you both chose to spend it together. Let's be bold! You wanted to let Cove know how much you liked him. Now was the time. You couldn't go another day without expressing these feelings you held. I must decide how bold I wish to be here. I'm gonna go for kind of the middle ground of, you asked if you could kiss him. I've got a great idea. Why don't we kiss each other? Nani the fuck? Joy? What the hell? That is not what I was expecting to come out of that. Cove's also just dying now. Great. Cove's eyebrows shot up fast enough that they could have flown off his face. As a match, his mouth might have dropped off his head for how much it fell open. He's ready. What? Why? Oh, okay. Clearly he doesn't want to kiss me. He clapped his hands over his mouth, his eyebrows lowered, but expression no less terrified. I'm sorry. Is the thought of kissing me scary? I'm cuddly. Oh no, I didn't mean, that's not how I meant it. It's not a bad idea or something, but why just say that right now? I'm kind of torn between being more direct about it and being more coy. I'm just gonna be direct, because I want to right now. Cove's chest began to rise and fall visibly as he swallowed short breaths in quick succession.
Sorry.
Sorry for being weird, it's just, I kind of thought or hoped that sometime something like this might happen with us talking about liking each other. Lord. You did? You were thinking about it before? He nodded ever so slightly. Your face felt a lot hotter after that. Cove brightened a little at your positive reaction, and his explanation continued. I, could sort of picture how it might go. What it'd be like with you and me. Aw. But just the first part. I couldn't ever imagine anything that'd come after. And now it's actually happened. We're there. He took another deep breath, stuttering on the exhale. This makes things different. A little bit, yeah. I honestly don't really like my options here. I think I'm gonna go with things don't have to be different. He gave you a wan smile. Thanks, but I don't think that'll work. I can't just forget. I definitely can't. Finally, Cove drew in a breath deeper than you would have thought his lungs could hold. They must have managed somehow, however, because he held it in without so much as a puff exhaled. That would have made sense if he had been about to dive underwater, but sitting in the middle of the room, it was an odd and concerning choice. Cove? Are you alright? He didn't respond, sitting as rigidly as a statue. You were about to get up, or at least nudge the chair with your foot, when he let out the breath and took another. This one, while deep, wasn't quite as dramatic. Okay. His voice cracked on the word, the O squeaking out, followed by a dip on the second syllable. You perked up, straightening up in your seat. It wasn't clear whether it was a response to your original question or the follow-up where you'd asked if he was alright, but having him speak again was a good start. We can kiss. I want to do that. Lord, boy. The gas escaped you. It was okay. He wanted to kiss you. I'm gonna say you were scared but kissed him. You untangled yourself from your resting position and stood up. Realizing your intent to actually go for it, Cove straightened up in the chair, his hands coiled together in his lap. As you moved towards him, you noticed his knees knocking together as he trembled. His decision not to rise from the chair made perfect sense. Poor boy. If he was that shaky while sitting down, there was no way he'd manage to stand without at least one of you falling over. You're... God, Cove. You gonna be okay, buddy? Your legs brushed against his quivering ones as you came to a stop in front of him. Cove was staring up at you. As you leaned in towards him, he echoed the motion and drew in towards you. Once you were close enough to feel Cove's breath on your face, you closed your eyes. The last thing you saw was Cove quickly doing the same. Your lips met with Cove's for a moment. His lips were pressed tightly together, unyielding, but it was alright. You were kissing him, and he was kissing you. Your stomach somersaulted. You couldn't believe it was really happening. In that moment, it felt warm, and it felt nice, and it felt right. You drew back, and Cove slipped down into the chair, the knuckles of his hands pale after gripping so tightly. Kissing is scary, kids. Thinking that he could do with some space to breathe, figuratively and literally, you took a step back. Cove shot up, his stance rigid. Lord, Cove, are you gonna be okay? Cove plastered a hand over his mouth, his eyes shut tight. His back then became bowed, shrinking him down. You could only just make out the few words he'd managed to summon.
Oh my god.
God, Cove. I can't believe we actually... His eyes flew open wide, but he didn't look your way, let alone meet your gaze.
Oh my god.
We kissed. Like, IRL, I'm a little bit worried about this child at this point. Like, he's freaking out a lot. But, I'm gonna say his reaction was really cute. You watched him adoringly as he tried to gather his senses. Cove only slammed his eyes shut once again. I want to tease him just a little bit. I'm terrible, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Was that bad? He was still holding the hand to his face, but in an attempt to answer, he emitted a muffled whimper. Aw, he's dying! With that obviously not working, I uncovered his face at last, bringing the hand to lay against his chest and looked at you. No. He opened his mouth, poised to speak, and pursed his lips as words failed him. On his third or fourth attempt, you heard what he had to say. I did like it. I'm glad that we, He swallowed, seemingly not able to speak the actual word. That we what? You know. I have no idea. I appreciate whoever wrote this dialogue because clearly they understood what I was going for. Joy! Yes, I am that asshole. Your earlier anxiety ebbed, knowing that the experience had been a welcome one. The smile on Cove's face was real but weary, not unlike the one he wore after a long study session. Like when he'd mastered something that had previously evaded him. The work had been hard, but the reward had been worth it. Was kissing me hard, Cove? With some newfound confidence, he drew himself up as he inhaled deeply. Each word he spoke next was delicate.
Joy.
Joy, I like you. A lot. Probably way too much. He ducked his head bashfully and opened an eye, peeking at you through the hair that had fallen over his face like a veil. He'd managed a smile.
Thanks for waiting for me.
Yee! Sorry. His eyes sparkled just looking at you, his affection transparently clear. He never could hide what he was feeling, and you couldn't be more grateful for that today. I'm gonna be a little playful. I like you even more. Cove squeaked out a nervous giggle. He curled his hand into a loose fist and brushed the knuckles idly against his cheek. Words evaded him as he opened his mouth and closed it again. I don't... He gave up on finishing the sentence, instead just smiling again. Aw. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of... Are you crying? He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. It was an action usually reserved for much later in the day, but at this point it already felt like a long day. Cove then pressed a hand to his creased forehead.
Oh my god.
Does this mean I'm your boyfriend or something now? Should we tell our parents? I don't know what Mom or Dad would do. There's a lot of concerns in there. You honed in on the simplest. There was no way your moms would let you have a boyfriend, even though that word juxtaposed with Cove's name made your heart race. I want you to be at least something, but I probably can't. I wish we were older. You didn't even know how much older you'd have to be before it would be permitted. Cove lifted his hand from his chest and reached towards you, halting halfway, then slowly, cautiously, hooked his fingers around yours. His palm pressed against the back of your hand. Well, you held his hand back, obviously. Don't just leave him hanging. You rotated your hand so that you were palm to palm with Cove, your thumbs crossing one another. You can get it to work. We always figure things out, sooner or later. You were temporarily struck speechless, your usual directness punctured by his honest belief in what you had together. Yeah, you're right. We're a pretty good team. Chuckling, Cove smiled at you and tightened his grip on your hand. Joy, Cove! Oh! The sudden call from downstairs caught you both unaware. You'd nearly forgotten the world outside your room. From the guilty look on his face, Cove had done the same. Just had a call. Cove's mom is ready to go. If you're quick, she might keep the mandated motherly smothering to a minimum. You doubted that, but it was nice that Mom and Miss Priest had their strange sense of humor in common. Your eyes met Cove's. Wordlessly, you headed downstairs together. Each step on the way there was painfully slow, like he was trying to delay the inevitable. His whole body tensed, leaving the house, and Cove froze altogether before you both could cross the street.
Oh.
The door's open. Dad must be taking her stuff out. He swallowed hard. She's really gonna leave. You rested your hand on his arm. You felt a small shiver ripple through his body as the warmth from your hand sank in. It'll be okay. You can do this. He looked at you uncertainly, and you gently squeezed his arm for support. At that, some of the conflict warring on his face eased a bit. Together you went across the street and inside his house, finding his parents in the living room surrounded by his mom's packed things. Hey kids. See, now he seems lighter. I'm losing my mind. I don't know. Good timing. I just called the taxi. I'm sorry, I'm like obsessing way too much over this man's skin tone. I don't know.
Hi.
And hi, Joy. So glad I get to see you today. It was fabulous getting to know you this summer. I finally got to put a face to the name I've been hearing. I finally got to put a face to the name I've heard so many times. She winked, and Cove pouted on cue over the teasing. I'm really happy I got to meet you too. Hopefully it won't be too long before we see each other again. Nodding, Kyra turned her attention back to her boys. She patted Cliff on the arm with a warm smile, and then she enveloped Cove in a crushing hug. Initially, Cove squirmed to break free from her grip, but his mom was unfazed and kept him locked in place. Heartbeats later, he gave in and hugged her back tightly. Aww.
I'm so glad.
I'm so happy this trip was a success. Cliff looked like he was bursting with pride. Well, not a 100% success, but still a passing grade, I think. Thinking back on everything that happened this summer, he started to look sheepish. Cliff scratched the side of his head, and an awkward chuckle escaped Cove. There were ways it could have gone smoother. I'm still keeping that in mind for the future.
Alright.
Good for you, Cliff. And I'll be trying harder to stay more in the loop. You watched as Cove smiled softly at both his parents, and you felt relieved seeing how much the whole family had come together since you first met them. Despite any underlying troubles, love was still there. After that, it wasn't long before the taxi arrived, rolling up in front of the house in a clear view of the front of the open door. Kyra stood up, smiling sadly. Well, that's my ride. Yeah. The matching reply got a chuckle out of Kyra as you all filed out of the house. Father and son went with Kyra's bags in hand. Once outside, you spotted your family waiting by the street, and to your surprise, Derek was also with them. I have not seen that boy practically all summer. Where the fuck has he been hiding? He stood uncomfortably, and he waved as soon as you noticed him. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw him once in the changing of the seasons, and then never again. He was gone forever for the rest of the summer. Like, he got mentioned a couple times, but I did not see him again. Where the fuck you been hiding, boy?
What's up?
Hey, Joy. Hi, Cove. When did you get here? My dad dropped me off just a little bit ago. Thought I could visit one more time before school started.
Sorry.
You picked a busy time. Sorry. Derek couldn't even look at Cove. He nervously kept rolling a pebble with the bottom of his shoe. Oh no.
Sorry.
I wasn't even thinking that your mom would be leaving today. I'm sorry, dude. What? You're not interrupting anything. You're always welcome here. It would have been sad if I didn't get to say goodbye before leaving. Derek came to hang out often, so it was inevitable that the two had met at some point this season. I think so too. It was apparent Derek would have preferred to have gotten there at a more opportune moment. He never liked seeming impolite, but their reassuring words soothed his worries. The tension he was holding in his body lessened, and he looked like he was feeling much more like himself. Hi, Derek. It was fun getting to know you. Bye, ma'am. Is there anything I can do to help? Nah, don't worry yourself over that. We're just about set. In that short amount of time, Cliff had gathered and packed the bags into the trunk. Kyra took one last look at everyone inside. Alright, I don't want to keep the driver waiting. It's time to head out. The crowd that had formed around started their chorus of farewells and well-wishes traveling, but Kyra still made no move to get into the taxi. She placed her attention on Cove. I'll call when I get to the airport and when I make it to Nevada. Also, you better call the moment you walk in the door at home. Otherwise, we'll be wondering all night if you got into trouble on the way there.
Can do.
I can do that. And could you call tomorrow too? So I can tell you how school went. Of course. I want to hear all about it. Kyra put a hand on Cove's head and affectionately ruffled his hair one last time. She then let go, only to move on to squeezing his cheeks in her hands instead. Love all these classic mom moves. Mom?
Cove.
I love you so much, baby. She was chuckling by the time she freed him and rounded things off with a small tap on the tip of his nose. Cove rubbed at his face with a grin. Finally, she walked to the car while waving and took her seat in the taxi. Cliff hooked an arm around Cove's shoulder and kept him close as he began to pull away. For a moment, Cove looked up at his dad and then wrapped an arm across his back.
Bye.
Bye, Mom. Bye, travel safe. Kyra rolled down the window and stuck her head out of it. She waved again while blowing kisses at Cove and Cliff. See you again. Before she was out of sight, you decided to... I'm not 100% sure what this means, but I think it's what I'm going for. I'm gonna call out with your family and hers. As you added your voice to the others, you watched Kyra's smile grow larger. Okay, good. That's what I thought. That's what I thought it meant, but I wasn't 100% sure because the phrasing was a little bit weird. The cab turned down another road and completely disappeared from view. Cove let go of his dad and took a few steps out into the empty street, still looking in the direction his mom went. He smiled quietly, deep in thought. You got the impression Cove was feeling better than he was earlier. He was finally content with the way things were. You jumped a bit when your mom put a hand on your shoulder, pulling you away from your thoughts. She smiled when you looked at her. That was a great vacation, huh? You nodded in agreement. Yeah, it was a good one. Cove walked back over to the group, still genuinely happy. Derek grinned at him welcomingly, and everyone else there smiled at him, even Elizabeth.
Well?
Well. Ma clapped her hands together, bringing everyone's attention back to the present. It's almost lunchtime. I think I'll put something special together. Her eyes sparkled with a plan, and Mom smiled. I bet you could use some help with that. That'd be absolutely wonderful. Derek glanced between the two, his eyebrows furrowed. Is there something I could do? Your mom's exchanged a fond expression. Ma shook her head.
How sweet.
That's very sweet, Derek, but it's alright. It's not your job. Technically, your dad left you under Cliff's watch. You're meant to be taken care of by him, not doing chores for the neighbors. Mom laughed a little over her own joke. You watched Derek look away, discouraged.
It's okay.
It's okay, I don't mind. He was a little bashful about it. He wondered if Mom's joke had just reminded him that he wasn't initially meant to be invited to lunch. It was getting a little awkward. Mom grinned sympathetically. Her comment was meant to lighten the mood, not bring it back down. Ma tried again to get things moving forward. Why don't you kids go have fun? You can all come back in about an hour. We'll make enough for everyone. Mom nodded in agreement.
Sounds good.
Another stunning idea, Lanny. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds like a plan then. I don't want to cramp your style. I've got some stuff to work on, so I can be out of your hair this afternoon. You should come by later too. No reason you should be the odd man out. Mom seemed amused as Cliff rubbed his neck nervously. He grinned a wavering but pleased smile.
Thanks very much.
I appreciate the invite. He looked over the assembled crowd with knowing glances. I can help too. With as many people as you're feeding, that's going to be a lot of food. Didn't you hear what we told Derek? It wouldn't be fair to make you cook when we're the ones inviting you in. Ma raised an eyebrow when Cliff waved it off.
Come on.
I insist. Derek would be missing time with his pals. This would be a break for me. I'm quite the chef. Ma and Mom exchanged further glances before Mom shrugged.
True.
An airtight argument. If you're sure, we'll be happy to have you, Chef Cliff. Cliff's grin widened and seemed more hyped than you'd expect him to be about helping with lunch. Cove shook his head and a fond smile on his face. Then all us grown-up people will be heading inside. I assume the rest of you kiddos are staying out? Maybe not all of them. Ma tilted her head, a silent question for Elizabeth. Your sister thought for a moment.
Alright.
I'll stay with the kids.
That's fantastic.
Both your moms smiled at her, while Derek and Cove didn't seem to appreciate her phrasing. But with the plan decided, all three parents waved and headed for your house. It was just you teenagers now. Elizabeth looked at you and the others, a curious expression on her face. So, what now? You silently wondered if Elizabeth only stayed out with you to avoid getting roped into work. Then again, she could just genuinely want to hang out. You couldn't tell with your sister. Cove spoke up after no one else did to answer Elizabeth's question. Want to go down to the shopping street? It's been a while, and I don't think there's a lot of other things we could agree on. Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Sounds awesome to me. Unlike you guys, I haven't been there 1,001 times. It's new to me. Let's do it. You strolled across the road as a group down to the beach and then to the left. It took less than 15 minutes to arrive, one of the conveniences of Sunset Bird. The four of you looked around at the familiar shops, trying to see if anything caught your attention this time. Derek was most enthusiastic. He checked out every stall with his eyes wide with wonder. Elizabeth and Cove were in good spirits as well. That's so cool! He ran over to a street magician who was currently doing a card trick for a group of enchanted tourists. Derek clapped when the magician showed a middle-aged man his card. Derek turned back to the group with a curious gleam in his face. What does it take to perform here anyway? Do you have to ask somebody, or do you just show up and start doing stuff? Who would you even ask? It's a public street. Hey, Miss Mayor, can I pull a rabbit out of my hat? Please, Flopsy is well behaved, I promise. Derek chuckled, his eyes searching up and down the scene. Maybe there's a boss of the shopping street? Nobody does any of this around my neighborhood. It's just a regular stores behind walls. It's different if someone wants a real store, but here I'm pretty sure people are just putting on their own little shows whenever they want and do whatever. That's so neat. Would we be allowed to do something too? Oh no. I figured that's where this conversation was going. No! Cove laughed and Derek began almost vibrating with excitement. Elizabeth rolled her eyes. What would we do? Well, I don't know what. Not yet, I mean. I just found out it's a possibility, you know. But there's gotta be something. We know cool stuff. I'm sure if we think about it, we could plan a show that'd really get a crowd pumped. You gave a look to the other two. Derek continued to brainstorm out loud about different potential performances while you glanced over at Cove and Elizabeth. I mean, I can bounce a soccer ball on my head. Last time I tried, I got 8 bounces before it fell. That's actually pretty impressive, kid. I wouldn't bring a ball here. Why not? Cove gestured at everything around. The stalls, the people, all the colorful chaos that made up the shopping street. Would you want to chase a lost ball here? And what if it hits somebody? Even if you're good, someone else could bump into you. That's true. Derek thought about it some more. Then he watched another performer, a woman doing tricks with 2 small dogs. One was fluffy and cream-colored, while the other was a cruel gray. The woman held up rings. Both animals jumped through the openings, happy to receive a treat in the end. Derek brightened. Maybe I'll teach crabs how to race. Crabs? It could work. I like this kid. With some amusement, the gang continued to peruse the stalls. Elizabeth found some earrings with a dangling, badly misprinted globe that everyone laughed at. Cove picked out a blob as Iceland, but Derek thought it had to be at Greenland. Don't want to confuse those two. You know, this is a world with what looks like 9 continents. I think you're both wrong. No, it's Australia. The other 3 giggled at your interjection. Suddenly Cove froze. You stared at him, and then tried to see what caught his attention. When you saw a familiar face down the way, it all made sense. Between the crowds, his bright hair stood out like a neon green bowl in a kitchen sink. It was Jeremy. That little shit. I thought we killed him. I mean... Jeremy slowly drifted his eyes down the street, and his eyes widened in mutual recognition. He definitely noticed you. Derek frowned and Cove sighed. Neither of them were happy to see him again. You glared at Jeremy. You narrowed your eyes and projected your dislike. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Her gaze swept over Jeremy without a hint of a clue. Jeremy simply scoffed to himself and waded deeper into the crowd of people. Derek relaxed and exhaled loudly. I'm glad he's not going to start anything. He peeked over at Elizabeth with a tiny smirk. See? That was the mean kid.
What?
Huh? She still didn't get it. That first summer day hadn't made nearly as much of an impression on her as it did for Derek, but he smiled and waved it off. Just forget about him. I already have. He laughed, and Cove smiled lightly. He seemed in a much better mood now that Jeremy was gone. Your eyes wandered over to where Jeremy disappeared. You hadn't forgotten the day you met him either. He was only going to be in town for a vacation with the parents he hated. That glimpse was probably the last time you would ever see him. You mentioned that realization to everyone. Well, that should be the last we see of Bullcut. I bet he's about to get out of here since the summer's over. Yeah, guess we don't have to worry about that guy anymore. Derek kicked a little rock in the road. It clattered forward, then rolled under the stall. But I still think it's kinda sad Jeremy turned out to be, well, like he is. It would have been nice to make another friend. Cove shook his head. He was clearly not broken up over what might have been. Good riddance. Elizabeth rolled her eyes at the strange farewell to the odd boy, not interested in the slants. She clearly didn't understand his impact, and at this point she didn't want to understand. You couldn't help but wonder, though, what would have happened if you would have interacted with Jeremy more. You were glad that you wouldn't find out. Jeremy was unlike anyone you had ever met before. You thought he was horrible. You and the group moved on from the stall and from Jeremy. It didn't take long for everyone to return to the joking. You all enjoyed what little time you had left, as Elizabeth mentioned the hour was almost up. The little trip had flown by, and lunch must have been waiting for you now. Derek bounced on the balls of his feet.
Okay.
Come on, guys, let's get going so that we can eat. I'm starving. Homebound, here we go. Cove stretched one of his arms lazily. Let's go then. You looked at him appraisingly. What is this option? I want to do it so bad! Piggyback ride? You ask Cove to carry you back to the house. Hey, Cove. Yeah? Carry me home.
What?
Oh, it just keeps getting better. I'm having so much fun. Cove turned red, obviously flustered. You explained you wanted a piggyback ride. I want a piggyback ride, and you're the only one big enough to give me one. Cove sighed and shook his head. Elizabeth and Derek became a chorus of laughter. Pretty please? You jokingly pleaded with him, much to the continued amusement of the other two. Alright. Oh, we gave in! Yes! Cove stepped over to you. He looked like he couldn't believe what he was doing. Your lips quirked into a large smile. Woo! I knew you'd come through for me. Piggyback rides. He carefully crouched down in front of you so that you could climb on. It wasn't hard to hop on. He slipped his arms under your legs and did his best to lift you. He was wobbly, but he managed to stand up all the way up. Good job. Elizabeth watched with a smirk on her face while Derek laughed even harder. It was fair to say that your antics were entertaining. You were glad Cove went with it. Cove carried you home, but he seemed pretty bashful about the situation. He struggled with how much to grip around you and whether or not to try to reposition things. But along with all that, he also seemed to feel some pride to be carrying you. This child. It was a pleasant walk home, and in no time you had made it back. Derek got to the front door and held it open for everyone as you each moseyed inside. The three parents were still in the kitchen. They looked up and waved. Welcome back, everyone. You made it just in time. I hope you're hungry. When Cove had brought you inside, the parents couldn't help but notice the odd conveyance. Your moms were unsure, and Mr. Holden raised an eyebrow.
Everything okay?
Did you pull something, Joy? I'm okay. Aw, Cove, you've gotten so strong.
Good.
And so reliable, too. What a guy. Cove rolled his eyes at the commentary, then started walking to your couch. He bent down, and you let yourself plop back on the couch. Thanks, Cove. I'd give it a 10 out of 10. Cove exhaled loudly and shook out his arms. He just seemed relieved that he made it. So, did everyone have a nice time out? She gestured for people to take a seat at the table. Plates and silverware have already been placed out. You took your normal seat. Elizabeth sat across from you, and Derek took the seat to your left. Cove sat on your right. But he blushed a little and began fidgeting with the silverware. His dad was the first to pick up on his extra awkwardness, but your moms weren't far behind. The parents shared looks at Cove's reaction. It seemed that he was struggling with how to act normal around his dad and your parents, or both, after what happened between the two of you upstairs. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we had a great time. It was fine. I had fun. Yeah, the bank heist went off without a hitch. Your joke got some chuckles around the table. That's good in my book. Burn the evidence. Casually, Mr. Holden sat in the empty seat across from Cove. He smiled at you and all the other kids. Mom set down a platter full of water glasses on the table. She looked down at the gathering. It's a good thing we have 8 chairs. I can't remember the last time we've had a group this big over for a meal. Can you pass the drinks down the other side? Make sure you all get one. Sure. Those close to the cups obliged and started offering waters around. As you pass Cove his drink, your hands touch. Cove froze. You had already let go, not yet realizing that he was too distracted to function in that motion. Fuck. The glass fell down on the table, landing with a sharp clatter of glass on wood. Cove scooted his chair back with a strange shout.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'll go get a towel or something. He looked around with a frantic panic, as if an object to soak up the water would magically appear if he turned his head fast enough. His dad bit at his lip in worry, rising from his own seat.
Well,
Cove, what's going on? You've been a little out of it today. Damn it, Cove, you're gonna blow our cover! Did something happen? Don't go on a bank heist with this kid. Cove tensed, frozen again. He stared at the water on the tabletop as if he wanted to sink into it. He spoke up to cover Cove. If something did happen, you should wait for Cove to want to talk about it. Trying to make him say things in front of everybody wouldn't be good. Mr. Holden nodded slowly. He still seemed worried, but after another look at Cove, he smiled sympathetically.
right.
Well said, Joy. I'm here when you're ready, son.
Of course.
These parents are so easy, man. Cove breathed a sigh of relief and shot you an apologetic look. You gave him an exaggerated wink when heads turned away from you. As everything got set up, Ma chided Elizabeth to take her elbows off the table.
Now.
And you shouldn't slouch. She pointed to Mr. Holden, who was leaning forward with both arms on the table. Oops. That's great. Mr. Holden seemed unsure about all the sudden attention and carefully rearranged his posture to something suitable for a fancy dinner. He smiled sheepishly at Ma. Like, maybe I'm uncultured swine, but I have never particularly cared about elbows on the table. Just never mattered to me, personally. Anyway, Elizabeth rolled her eyes, and Ma gave a level look at her. You shouldn't be impolite to a guest in the house either. Elizabeth groaned, long and long-suffering. Ma giggled, and Mr. Holden chuckled.
Not bad.
The lot of you could learn a thing or two from Derek. He has the best manners here. Derek blushed, but it was true. His posture was upright and formal. He even held his fork gracefully. His table manners, on top of all his attempts to aid your parents, made him the model meal attendee behavior.
Aw.
It's nothing. It's true, though. You've been a lovely guest. I've noticed that, too. It's always nice when you stay over, Derek. Derek smiled and sat a little taller in his chair. And do you have anything good to say about our other guest? She looked deliberately at Cove with a teasing smirk. Or is there just nothing to say? Well, Cove is my number one, but he does still clean his hands by wiping them on his pants. Just expose him to the table. Cove frowned at that and absentmindedly brushed his hands on his pants legs. Lord. Your mom's laughed lightly.
There.
Elizabeth, you should know, after all these years, Cove is hardly a guest anymore. Cove smiled awkwardly. Thanks. You complimented Derek on his politeness. It's cool how you know all those manner things. Oh, thank you. He seemed more embarrassed by getting a compliment from a kid his age. Everyone ate their meal together and continued to hang out for this afternoon. After the food, you and the others played a couple games and talked about your plans for the upcoming year. The time passed by quickly, and soon it was time to part ways. Mr. Holden talked to your moms, and Cove drifted over to you, knowing that as soon as his dad finished up, he would be leaving. It'd be cool to say, but we have some stuff to do before everything closes today.
Okay.
Yeah, bye. Could you move? I need the phone. Cove raised an eyebrow, and Elizabeth impatiently gestured behind him. Cove realized he was standing right in front of where the receiver was placed. He sidestepped out of the way and shook his head, clearly thinking Elizabeth was rushing too much. Your sister made a beeline for the phone and started dialing the number of what you figured was one of her friends. Knowing Elizabeth, she was going to be on there for a while. You, Cove, and Derek shuffled closer to the door. It seemed like Mr. Holden was wrapping up his conversation, so everyone started saying their various farewells.
Talk to you later.
See you later, Cove. We gotta do this again sometime. Yeah, see you. Cove turned to you and smiled slightly. Bye, Joy. You hugged Cove goodbye. You stepped forward and spread your arms wide. Cove only had a moment to react before you encircled him in your arms. Cove hugged you back tightly, and his chest rumbled as he laughed. His cheeks were slightly red, especially when he looked over and noticed that Derek was watching the whole thing. Derek smiled amusedly. Seriously, dude, we'll have to hang out later. I'm gonna miss you during school. He offered Cove a high five, and the two boys clapped their hands together. Cove and his dad left soon after. Your parents started cleaning up the house, and Elizabeth was still chatting to your friends on the phone. It was just you and Derek left. He elected to stay outside in front of the house to wait for his dad to pick him up. You decided to keep your guest company, although he was originally Cove's visitor. A light summer breeze blew through your hair, and Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot. Thanks for waiting with me. He kicked at the ground distractedly.
Well,
That's still gonna be a while, so do you want to go for a walk? Sounds great. One less trip for the day. The two of you walked down the street again, just wandering without a destination planned. It was a quiet stroll. Too quiet for Derek being the company. You turned to him when you had noticed that he wasn't saying a word. That was unusual. Derek always had something you could chat about. You weren't sure if you should ask about it. Somehow you ended up at the old park near the beach. You glanced over to Derek once more, still expecting him to say something any second now. However, nothing came from him. In fact, now you noticed a frown creeping on his face. Derek smiled when he realized you were watching. At least, his mouth was turned up. There wasn't anything that really felt happy in the expression. He turned away and the smile fell off his face. His eyes stared intently at the ground, and you raised an eyebrow. Is everything okay? I'm a little sad. It's just, with school starting back up again, it's gonna be harder to visit. I'm gonna have homework and clubs and practices and everything else.
Sucks.
It really sucks we go to different schools. His face screwed up and his fists were closed tightly together. This was really concerning him. What if we don't have time? He channeled some optimism into the conversation. We'll mug tang. We can talk over the phone and have plans for weekends. It'll be okay. Derek looked up at the sky. It was orange and purple with little wisps of clouds scattered around. A plane flew high with a jet stream trailing behind it. Then he turned to the ground again. Derek's face was tilted far enough down that it was harder to read his expression. Hey, Joy, I actually wanted to talk to you about something, if you don't mind. There was a pause, and you waited for him to finish his thought.
Sorry.
I was just kind of wondering, do you like guys at all? Like, would you ever want to be with someone who was a boy? Sorry if that's weird to ask. Have you seen this Let's Play? Anyway. I could be with a guy. Okay, then... He hesitated before finishing his question.
So...
Lord. So, what I mean is, just... Is there any guy you think is kind of cool? That you like? Around here? Not at school or anything like that? He ducked his head further. You already knew the answer. You already knew the answer. You confronted that very topic this afternoon. I'm about to crush this boy. I'm so sorry, Derek. I'm so sorry. Oh, man. Well, I like Cove. Derek chuckled and didn't look surprised at all. Yeah, I kind of thought so. That's cool. I really hope things work out. Thanks for answering my random questions. He shot you a thumbs up. I hope we'll always be friends, no matter what. Even if we don't see each other for a long time, or if we get really busy, I still hope. He cut himself off and met your eyes. There was something serious to him, sincerely worried that you'd fall out of friendship. I hope so too. I want us to be friends forever. Derek smiled, mostly to himself. He seemed a little more like the usual. Then for sure, we have to make the most of the next year. Then the year after that, and the year after that. He rambled on for a while about things. We'll just make the most of every year. Right. You smiled and felt like your friendship was still strong. You didn't spend much longer at the park after that. Derek didn't want to miss his dad, so you both made your way back to your street. After Derek went back home, you decided to settle in for the night, stretching your arms over your head. You noticed that the living room and the telephone were free. And I've just noticed that I've gone over my time. So, tune in next week to find it, next 2 weeks. In the next two more weeks. Still gonna be on a Monday, but not a Monday. God. I'm so tired, guys. I'm sorry. It's been a long ass month. Anyway. I will decide what I'm gonna do, in the next, episode that will go up for you guys at some point in... I think it'll be July. Yeah, I think that might be the first episode of July, if I'm not much mistaken. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next one.